demonstration of the NetSuite Advanced Procurement module. My name is Barry Irwin, and I'm a solutions consultant out of the Denver office. Today, talking about is the business challenges around the Advanced Procurement module, really why it was created, what we are trying to alleviate, what exactly is Advanced Procurement, what are the features that come with that module, and then actually get into the system and show you a demonstration of the application, and then at the end we'll summarize with some best practices and the value that it'll bring to you. This is that we found around procurement in itself that led us to create this module was the inefficient requisition process. So a lot of the time there were a lot of requesters, there was a lot of transactions back and forth with the vendor, and in the previous procurement module, each request was its own purchase order, so there was no way to combine multiple requests into a single purchase order. The second challenge was the inability to enforce corporate approval policies. So we've added an approval an approval process around the requisition process so that you can actually choose how you want to route requisitions and when you want them to approve automatically. And then procurement overspending or maverick spending. So what we've allowed you to do now is actually create vendor contracts as well as requests for quotes vendors, so they have the ability now to manage when a purchase order is created from a request, and you can actually choose which vendors to use and which pricing to take advantage of. And along with that is the difficulties managing those vendor negotiated contracts. You now have the ability to store that contract information in the system so that you have ease of use of finding it, and you can also apply it to a purchase order as well. So features that come with the Advanced Procurement module are as follows. First being that requisition record. So previously the user had to create a purchase request, which is essentially a purchase order in an unapproved status. So they had to actually go in and know the vendor and create that purchase order. Now with the requisition being its own record, all they have to do is select the goods or services they want. They don't have to worry about the vendor, and it doesn't create that purchase order. It creates a requisition that then moves downstream to a buyer or a purchasing manager, where they then have the ability to select the vendor, choose if they want to merge those requisitions into a single purchase order. The next is the purchase contract, also known as a vendor contract. This allows you to manage the contracted terms or pricing or delivery schedules with the vendor. So this record allows you to enter all that in. You can review it whenever you need, and you can also apply that contract to a purchase order so that you can take advantage of any discounted pricing. There is a blanket purchase order. This allows you to set predetermined purchase orders over a time frame. So if you know you're going to be ordering a specific number of items throughout the year, then you can create a blanket, which is essentially a template purchase order, and then you can release those as you need to, either manually or at lead time, or let the system do it for you so that that purchase order doesn't need to be recreated every time. Finally, request for quote. So this will tie in with your purchase contracts with vendors. This will give you the ability to invite vendors into your bidding process for goods or services. So you actually send out to vendors what items you're looking to sell. You can let them compete so that you can actually select the vendor with the best pricing for you. So the flow that we're going to go through today is we'll start out as an administrator, and we'll actually get into the system and show the employee setup and the workflow and how you can actually set the limits for what a person can request and who it should route to if over that limit. Then go through a blanket purchase order. We'll set that up. We'll actually show you multiple ways to release the purchase order from it. You can do it manually or at lead time. And then we'll create a request for quote that'll submit to your vendors. It'll give them the ability from their vendor center to actually reply back to that request, and then you can convert that into a vendor contract or purchase contract. Then we're as an employee center and be an end user that actually does the requesting. We'll request some items, how they can actually review the status of the request. It can be approved by manager. And finally, we'll get in as the buyer or procurement manager, and we'll look at all those requests that have been created. We'll actually create purchase orders from that and combine those down into a single purchase order. And then at the end, we'll actually apply one of our purchase contracts to that purchase order. So into the system here. In the system as the administrator, let's go check out a user record here for someone to know is a requester or an end user. So for employee record, under the Human Resources tab, you actually have the ability, like with the purchase request, to set what their requisition limit is. So the purchase limit we have here is set to 1,000. Anything requested under this will automatically be approved. Anything over will be routed to their approver, which in this case is Mark Jones. So that's a standard native workflow that comes with the Advanced Procurement module. You obviously have the ability to tweak or add your own workflow. You can add multiple levels of routing. You can route based on a specific item, or you can send to different users based on what they actually are wanting to purchase. So we'll look at blanket purchase orders. I'm going to go and create a new one here. From the blanket purchase order form, you have to select the vendor. So this is, let's say we know that we're going to be needing to order 100 phones over the rest of this year for new employees. I'm going to order those phones from Digital Supply, and I select the start and end date that this blanket PO is actually going to be for. So it's going to start today, and we'll take it to the end of the year, so end date of the 31st of December. I set location and memo or departments or any other classifications that I want for reporting on this blanket purchase order, and then I can actually add the item. Use the Android phones and say that we want 100 of these over the year, over this time frame. The ability to do now on the line item level is actually set up a schedule. So I'm going to click the pencil here. You'll see we have two ways we can create a purchase order from this blanket. We can do it manually, or we can do it at lead time. If we choose at lead time, it's going to use the order date along with this lead time to actually show up in our order item screen. If we're going to choose manually, go through and I can add all purchase orders out if I would like, or create a schedule with our auto generate feature here. So I can choose how often I want to release a purchase order. Choose, and then I've got my start and end date that it's pulled from the blanket. And when I generate this, it's now going to create purchase orders monthly for that time frame. So 15 a month, and then the remaining month will get the last 9. So I have this to manual. I could go ahead and release here by checking off however many of these I want to release. So let's do the first one and save this. This is now going to create a purchase order from the blanket. So the first one has been created. If we open this up, we should see that it's for 13 Google Android phone, quantity 13, and it's for Digital Supply. So the first PO was released from this blanket. So a nice feature of the blanket purchase order is it's actually going to give you reporting capabilities to see what has actually been released. So on the main page here, we can see the purchase amount that has actually been released. Once this PO has been received, we'll see that amount here, and once it's been billed, it'll be showed here, and so on. We see in the related transactions tab the purchase order, and if we go back into the schedule, we can see the purchase order that was released as well. So the next time I go in, I'll set one was released for May. I could now manually release it for June if I would like. So let's look at a blanket purchase order that was not set to manual. So I have one in here for Digital Supply. Items, I actually have the schedule set to at time. So what it's going to do is it's going to show up in your order items screen. So for those of you that are familiar with the items to order screen, there's a reminder that you can have on your dashboard. So it's going to let you know as soon as the lead time arrives for that blanket PO purchase order. And I can go in there and view it. So we now have a blanket PO items tab on the order items screen. So I can select it, choose location, and actually display any POs that need to be released based on lead time of the blanket purchase order. I have one here that needs to be released. I can go ahead and do that. Let's see. It'll work the same way as I did it manually. It's created purchase order. I can go back to that blanket purchase order. I can see what has been ordered on the related transactions tab. I can see that as well. The way you want to do it, manually or at lead time will work. And that's blanket purchase orders essentially. So it gives you the ability to not have to go in and create a brand new PO each time. You can just lease one either manually or at lead time from the blanket. So let's go on now to request for quotes and purchase contracts. So the purchase contract is that negotiated terms and pricing that you want to store in the system for a vendor. But the request for quote will be to set up a front request to create an actual purchase contract. So I've got one here in the system. What that allows me to do is actually choose vendors that I want to give me pricing on for specific items. So in the request for quote, I've told them the start and end date that I want this contract to be for. So it's just going to be for the rest of this year. And then I've also told them when the bid close date is. So they need to respond to me by this close date if they want to be able to have a chance at being awarded. And the two items that I want them to compete for are the iPad and the iPad mini. So I have items here. I've also added some tier pricing. So into the additional pricing field, I can see that I actually want them to provide me pricing for different quantities. So from 0 to 4, 5 to 24, and 25 and over. So I'll be able to do that. They'll be able to provide me with terms, so payment terms, that umbrella discount, special instructions they can provide, and then I'm able to choose vendors that I actually want to submit this to. I'm going to submit to these three vendors. As soon as I save this request quote, it's actually going to email them and show up in their vendor center. So let's get into one of the vendor centers real quick. And as Digital Supplies Vendor Center, I can go to my transactions and I choose request for quote, and see that request for quote that was sent by me to the vendor. So they can go and take a look at it, they can edit it, they've got time to save this before they actually submit it, but they actually go in and add terms and go in and add their pricing. So I went ahead and added the pricing for the iPad and the iPad mini. Save this, it's going to notify me that they sent their quote and I can now award the vendor that I want to. So let's go back to the administrator. Done via purchasing manager, any role. I've just got it set to administrator for ease of use here. So let's take a look now at that request for quote again. And if you noticed before, on the vendor tab, you actually see when they've responded. So you can actually go into the response from here, or you can go to the awards tab. You can actually start to compare who it actually was. So if we edit this, ability to compare the vendors. So it's automatically chosen me the vendor with the lowest average rate. So it shows that one vendor is better for the iPad than it is for the mini. But I can click compare vendors here to see where the actual price differences are. So this is pretty big here, and I can click on the mini and see where they are here. So off 99 cents. So I want to go ahead and award this to computer. So I could select them for both items, and then can click award and click save. And this will now create a vendor or purchase contract for the vendor in the system for these items. We'll look at that actual contract. The contracts I have in the system, I'm just going to view one for digital supply here. This is also one for 2015 iPad best prices. So you can see the purchase contract will look a lot like that request for quote. It also looks a little bit like the blank PO form where you select a vendor, you select a start and end date, you have more classifications. We have terms here, so they've actually said that once you hit $50,000 for this time frame, you're going to get a further 10% discount. But on them themselves, we have the ability to see the additional pricing. So we can see in this case, they just had two-tier pricing where they get a discount at 25, and with the iPad mini, they get a discount at 25 or more. These purchase contracts are in the system. They will become available on a purchase order for this vendor. So let's take a run through the requisition to purchase order process. Switch over to the Employee Center. From the Employee Center, you did have the purchase request. This is just a purchase order in a non-approved status, so they had to go through and select the vendor and get that all squared away. With the new requisition, All they have to do is enter in the items. So it's its own record. It's a different form. I can put the items that I want. We'll choose an ad. Let's go ahead and choose 20. Notice that it does select the vendor, but there's not an asterisk. It's not required to. So if there's not a preferred vendor, nothing will display there and you don't have to worry about it. In this case, the item itself was set up as an Apple preferred item. So you can see Apple's rate here of $4.39. I don't need to worry about that on this requisition. I can just submit it, and we'll see that since we're over the $1,000 limit for this requester, this will remain in pending approval status. Save. Sure enough, it is pending approval. So that's actually going to create an email and send that to the approver for this requester, telling that they have a requisition to approve. As the requester, I can always go in and view any requisitions I've created, so I can see that this one is still pending approval. A new one here. We're under the $1,000, so that can automatically approve. So for this, let's do a mini, and let's do 2. It shows Apple. I don't need to worry about that. It's $1,000, so that when I click save, data should turn to approve, which it does. The overall status is now pending order. Going to my list of requisitions here. See, now I have the 2 requisitions I've created. One is pending approval, the other should be pending order. So when the requisition is approved, it's not an actual purchase order. It's now sitting downstream for the buyer or purchasing manager to actually decide how to turn that into a purchase order. So approve that other one real quick. I'm going to switch over to the Employee Center Manager. So this can be done from the Employee Center, or it can be done from a full user to actually approve requisitions. But they're all going to display here for me. I can open them up individually to look at them. If I do that, it'll give me the ability to actually reject or approve right here. Or I can do a bulk approval or rejection if I need to do that. So I could select multiple and choose the appropriate action, submit that. So it's approved. That's now going to email the requester back and say your requisition has been approved, and it'll now change to pending order as well. So let's take a look at those pending orders as the purchase manager. The page that is available with the Advanced Procurement module is the Order Requisitions page. So what page is going to do is it's going to display any requisition in the system that has been approved that needs to be created into a purchase order. So this is where we can take advantage of being able to merge multiple requisitions into a single PO. We can also at this point choose the vendor. So that Digital Supply is giving us a better price than Apple. We can change this to Digital Supply for both items. And by kicking these off and clicking Submit, it's now going to merge both of these requisitions into a single purchase order and our purchase order. So let's go look at it. Sure enough, it's now Digital Supply, purchase order, and we now have both line items here. So let's edit this to show you that we now have the ability to add a purchase contract to a purchase order. So we can do it at the line item level, or we can do it at the order level itself. I'm just going to use it from right here so that you can see easily the cost from Apple, $4.39. So it's just remembering that cost. What we actually do now is select the purchase contract that's out there for Digital Supply. And when I select this, you'll see it automatically changes to $3.99. You could even go a step farther and change the pricing here. So that it now moves to $3.79. It's now taking advantage of that quantity pricing. It's been able to both merge Apple requisitions into a PO, and I've also been able to apply a purchase contract here so I can really take down the price that my request is costing here. So let's do that. One page real quick, so we'll save. Now pending receipt, so now it's just like a standard purchase order. It's ready to be received or billed. It's going to email the vendor, and it's also going to update that purchase contract. So if I go back and take a look at the purchase contract, you're going to see now they have a purchased amount associated with. I can get to related transactions, and I have a link directly back to that purchase order, so it's all managed right from there. Is the advanced procurement module. To kind of finish up here, let's take a look at, summarizing. Really what we allow you to do with advanced procurement is we allow the end users to submit requests without having to know the vendors. All you have to do is put in the items or services that they need. Because you have the requisition record now, this gives the buyer the ability to consolidate items from multiple requisitions into a single purchase order. So this will allow you to both increase buyer efficiency, and it'll also minimize the transaction costs. So you won't have as many back and forths with the vendors. You won't have as many transactions to worry about. It'll give you workflow. So this allows you to expedite approvals. You can route based on the dollar amount, based on the item, or based on the person. You also have the ability to create a request for quote, which will allow your vendors to get into, a bidding war so that you can actually get the lowest price. And then once that purchase contract is created, you can utilize that along with the blanket POs to actually reduce procurement spending. It can also enforce compliance. So if you want to only use specific vendors, you don't have the requesters having to worry about that. It'll all funnel down to a purchaser or a buyer so that they can manage all of that. So everyone for listening today. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact your account manager and they can help you set up any further demonstrations or any questions you